Hey, what's going on, guys? Back with more deck profile things. I'm using physical cards this time just because the last one was sort of a test of my new computer and its capabilities of recording. I like that, but I also like using physical cards, so I'll probably do a mix of both when I do deck profiles from now on. We are, of course, back with Despia just because I love this deck. It's so much fun. The last one was the Invoke Shit All package splashed into it. I do think that's the strongest version of the deck just because there's so much you can do with Invoked. Uh, it synergizes really well with being fusions. This is going to be a more pure build, though. I just wanted to try that out. I'm trying out different builds just to see what I like more, so I decided to go with pure this time. Let's just get right into that. First off, I understand why people would want to not run 3 of this just to make space for other things, but I do run 3 Owlbear. I just think it makes the most sense. This is one of your best starters. It gets you into your engine. It gets you any card you need, and it situationally floats to be able to get more advantage. Situational negate when it floats as well. This card is just really nice, and it's one of your strongest cards to be able to have. So I do play that at 3. You usually only play 2 of this, but in the pure build, you do play 3 Dramaturge of Despia. This card is nuts. Use it as fusion material. It's able to special summon itself. Your opponent special summons from the extra deck, and you can target negate. It's also a 3K body and a level 8. This card is just ridiculous in the Despia archetype. You do play 3 Tragedy in the pure build, and that's just because you can take advantage of this card a lot more in the pure build. If this card gets sent to grave or banished by a card effect, and the wording on this and where the commas are placed is a little strange. It says if this card is sent to the graveyard, comma, or banished, comma, by a card effect. That leads me to believe that it has to be banished by a card effect to trigger the remaining effect, but it can be sent to the graveyard by any other means to trigger its effect. But the way it's worded, it could mean that it has to be sent to grave or banished by a card effect. I'm really not sure, and I would like to know that, because the way that I think it works is if it's sent to the graveyard by any means, then you can just summon this and link it off for Linkaribo to be able to trigger the effect. But if that's not how that works, then this card's a little bit weaker, but you do have a lot of ways to trigger that off regardless. But I would like to know which one it is, because I do run Linkaribo in the extra deck to be able to trigger this if that ends up coming up. But I digress. Anyway, the rest of the build, 2 Despian Comedy. This is essentially just situational negate. If your opponent activates a card or effect that would target a face-up Despia card you control, you can discard that and negate it. Not even negate and destroy. You really only play this just because it's another Despia name. It has a situational negate. And if you need extra bodies on the board to trigger some floating, you can sacrifice a fusion to special summon it. Most of it never really comes up, but it's just a nice card to have, and you can side it out if you don't ever need it. For the spells, you do play 3 Branded Opening. This card is ridiculous. It's your E-Telly/Rhoda, and only 2 Theater. Some builds are actually only playing 1, and I get it. You really only need 1 a lot of the time. You can recur it from the grave off of Despian Tragedy. Problem is, if your opponent banishes it off of Cosmic Cyclone or something else, you don't have a way to get it back from the banish, which is why I do run 2, because it's nice to draw this, so you're able to search out other things if you need other branded spells and traps. But I do play 2 just in case 1 gets cosmic, because you don't have a way to get it back if it's banished, and you kind of need the field spell to be able to do all your fusion shenanigans. Some other tech cards I do play 1 Gold Sarcophagus and 1 Foolish Burial, because these trigger Despian Tragedy, and that's always nice because it gets you something else that you need to your hand. For the Albaz package, which is what I do run, I run 2 Fallen of Albaz, the 3 Albion, the Shrouded Dragon, and the 1 Branded in White. Pretty standard for this, I would think. Albaz is ridiculous. It is a target super poly that your opponent is able to respond to, which is a little bit unfortunate, but this deck is able to take advantage of that pretty nicely. If nothing else, it forces a negation, and then you can just go into the rest of your package. So I think this is fair to play. The last tech card that I play in here is 2 Allure of Darkness. 3 would put the deck over 41. it would put the deck at 41 if I were playing 3. So I think 2 is enough. You're really only using this to draw into more negation. It does synergize really well with Despia Tragedy because that does banish it off of a card effect. And you just play a lot of darks in here in general if you don't see your engine, so that's really handy to play in that regard. But I think 2 is enough here, unless you want to make space for some other stuff. Onto the hand traps / the tech section, I do play 3 Ash Blossom. Funny enough, this is the weakest one as far as synergy goes because it is not a light or a dark. But it's Ash, good in any deck, good against any deck. You know how I feel about it. 3 Effect Veiler, not really much need to explain this. Effect Negation, it's a light, so it synergizes. It's really handy. I did go with the Cali effect suggestion of 2 Iris Sword Soul. It's a light, it's a level 8, and you have a lot of ways to be able to proc this effect because we do also play cards like Infinite Impermanence in the deck for additional effect negation. So if you have this and or this and this, you can trigger this really easily. But just in the deck in general, you have Dramaturge of Despia, you're going to be able to trigger this card pretty easily because you have a natural effect negation that you go into in the form of Dramaturge. And then the last few I play are 2 Cosmic Cyclone and 1 Called by the Grave. I recommend having at least some type of spell and trap removal / chain ability in the deck because this deck does struggle pretty hard with back row matchups. So I recommend at least having something in the main deck and a good portion of the side deck. I'll show you the side deck later, which does have a decent amount of back row hate because this deck struggles with that. But otherwise, pretty much just main and side for your local. I think this works out pretty well just in general, but for my local as well. But we'll see how that goes. That is it for the main deck. For the extra deck, should be pretty straightforward. Well, there are a few choices that I guess would depend on your own personal preference and whatever happens at your local. One thing I absolutely recommend you playing in the pure build would be 3 Despian Quiritus. You absolutely use 3 in the pure build. This is a grind deck. This is one of your best names to be able to go into. The one that you can or cannot play entirely depends on you. I do play 1 Proskinian. Sometimes you never go into this. Sometimes it's the best card that you can go into. It's really, really situational. I just have it in here anyway because you do have a decent bit of space in the extra deck, so I just decided to run 1 anyway. This card can really, really be handy if it comes up. It can special summon or banish something from the extra deck in your opponent's graveyard. If you beat over something, it burns for either its attack or defense, whichever is higher. That can help in time. This card just has a decent amount of utility that you can use. For the other fusions, basically just facilitating Fall of Albaz. 2 Albion, the Branded Dragon, which can help you get into other fusions as well. 1 Titanclad. This is only here because you can contact fuse with something with 2,500 or more attack. I considered putting in some Dogmatica stuff to be able to take advantage of this further, but I just couldn't find the space for it, and Dogmatica's cool in this deck, but it does restrict you pretty heavily because, I mean, you do want to go into the extra deck, and I just wanted to make space for some other stuff instead of Dogmatica. I do play Sprind, the Iron Dash Dragon. This is only in here because it can contact fuse with an effect monster special summon this turn. And, of course, the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon because Dark is a really popular attribute, and Fall of Albaz just so happens to be a Dark, so you can fuse for that if you need to. The rest of the stuff that I play in here, the reason I had a question about linking it off for Linkuriboh is because I do play the Linkuriboh. As far as I know, you can link off Despia Tragedy for Linkuriboh, and that triggers it. I hope it works like that, otherwise this card is just useless in here, and I may consider putting something else in besides this. I do play Nightmare Phoenix. 2 reasons. 1, as I said, this deck struggles with back row matchups, so you need some removal. 2, Contact C sucks. You cannot play under that card, so you need generic links. And another one you can also use is the Blackluster Soldier of Chaos. This deck can use this card pretty well because you can get to 3 monsters decently easy in this, especially turn 3. And it's basically just your card that's difficult for your opponent to deal with. It's your Dragoon out, and other cards like that if it ends up coming up, because it's a non-target banish. It's just a really, really handy card that this deck is able to take advantage of, so I just decided to throw it in here if it ever comes up. And then for the last 3 cards, this deck doesn't really OTK, but if you're in a simplified board state, then the Dragoobion Numeron Dragon package can help with that. It does hurt when your opponent has disruption for it, but if you think that you can go into this and put the game away, then this can just help to OTK and end the game if you think you're in a position where you can do that. On to the side deck. I'll explain. Some of these choices are just for locals, but a lot of this is just covering up for the deck's weaknesses if you just so happen to be in a tough matchup like a back row matchup. 3 Nibiru. This is just for special summon spam. If you're worried about making a token that's too big that you can't get over, if you give it too much attack or too much defense and you're not able to beat over it with something like Proskinian, the token is a light, so you can at the very least fuse for it with Albion, the branded dragon, so you'll be able to get rid of that. Don't worry about that. Nibiru still works. 3 Jizukuru. Kaijus can be handy in a lot of matchups, and this is just in here because you can contact fuse with it with a decent number of your extra deck things. You can fuse for it with Titanclad because it's 2,500 or more attack. It's a light, so you can fuse for it with Albion. If it's in the same turn, you can fuse for it with Sprin, the Iron Dash Dragon. This is just the one that helps you the most as far as some of your fusing targets. 3 Dark Ruler, because we don't like big negation boards that we cannot fight through. This deck can struggle with that if your opponent has too many negates up, so we have that. And then the rest is just back row hate because this deck doesn't really fight through that. We have the 1 Feather Duster plus the 2 Lightning Storm, and then 3 evenly matched to be able to fight through stuff like Imperial Order and Secret Village of the Spellcaster, because we have people that play those. We have Tri-Brigade players, we have Altergeist players. It's very annoying, and we do as much as we can to get around that. And that is about all I have for the deck profile. A lot of these choices I think are just cool. Some of them are necessary. I do think the Invoke Shadal package is a bit stronger, but we'll see how the pure build works out. I know one of the questions would be, why didn't I find room for Super Poly if this is basically superpoly.deck? And essentially, I just think that the Fallen of Albaz package is enough. I wanted to make room for more hand traps because that's really what's going to disrupt your opponent more so than Super Poly. Because I've had a bunch of matchups at my locals where I've had a Super Poly in my hand and they just never play into any target that I have, and it's just a dead card. So I figured just make room for more hand traps that'll get the job done anyway, and it'll be okay. And that's about all I got for this. We'll see how this works out. I'm going to have fun regardless, just because I think this deck is really cool, even though it's not that strong. But I have fun playing with it anyway. So that's about all I got. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good rest of the day.